The Weight of Stars. A Victoria Guard story. They said I failed. My own blood looked me in the eye and said it. My mother whispered it at Sunday dinners. My father shook his head every time my name came up. My aunts passed it around like a dish of shame. Victoria couldn't cut it. Victoria washed out. Victoria, the one who fell. For 3 years, I swallowed that story whole. I let it live inside my chest like a stone. I wore civilian clothes and said nothing when they celebrated my sister Dana's promotions, her victories, her name in the local paper. I sat in the back of rooms and made myself small. That all ended on a Tuesday morning in a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C. I had not planned to be there. Nobody plans to watch their sister face a federal judge on charges of classified document mishandling, conspiracy to obstruct a military investigation, and conduct unbecoming an officer of the United States Armed Forces. Nobody plans to sit in a wooden gallery pew with their hands folded in their lap, watching the woman your family called Asterisk, the successful one Asterisk, stand at a defendant's table in a gray suit instead of a uniform. But there I was, Victoria Guard, the failure, the quiet one. I wore no medals that morning. I had locked mine in a box years ago after the incident in Kandahar that officially never happened. The operation that was classified so deep that my discharge papers said administrative instead of what it actually was. I had signed documents I couldn't talk about. I had saved lives in a theater of war that the government couldn't acknowledge. And when they needed someone to take the fall for an operation gone sideways, they handed that fall to me. I let them because I had sworn an oath, and because the men I had protected were still out there, still breathing, still going home to their children. My silence was the price of their survival. I paid it without flinching. My family never knew. They only saw the discharge papers. They only heard asterisk administrative. And in the silence of the things I could not say, they built their own story. And in that story, Victoria Guard was a woman who couldn't measure up. So I sat quietly at my sister's court trial and watched the prosecutor lay out a case that made my stomach clench. Dana had been leaking intelligence. Not to enemies, she was not a traitor in the classical sense, but to a private defense contractor with political connections deep enough to reach Senate chambers. She had been trading classified assessments for promotions, for funding redirected toward her unit, for the kind of career acceleration that looks like genius from the outside. She had built her entire decorated life on a foundation of compromised information. And she had been brilliant about it. For 7 years, she had been brilliant about it. The federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Chambers, was midway through presenting her third exhibit when something shifted in the room. A junior attorney at the defense table dropped a folder. Papers fanned across the floor. In the scramble to recover them, I caught a glimpse of a document header, a classification marking I recognized. Not because I had seen it recently, because I had written the original protocol that document was based on, in a basement office. In a country most Americans couldn't find on a map, in the year that I supposedly failed. My spine went straight. Judge Harold Mercer, a 64-year-old federal judge with the patient eyes of a man who had heard every possible human lie, called a recess. During that recess, something happened that I still think about when I can't sleep. He walked over to the gallery, not to the attorneys, not to the clerk. He walked directly to me. An aide had apparently told him who I was, or rather, who I had been before the papers said otherwise. He stopped at the end of my row. The courtroom was half emptied. Dana was being escorted out a side door. Our mother was crying softly 2 seats to my left. Judge Mercer looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, with the weight of a man who had spent decades reading people across a courtroom, "Would you please take over? I'm not qualified to handle this federal case." The room went very still inside my chest. I want to tell you that I hesitated, that I was humble, uncertain, gracious in the way stories require their heroes to be gracious. But the truth is that something in me had been waiting for exactly this moment for 3 years. Not for vindication. I had stopped needing that somewhere over the Hindu Kush at 2 in the morning with a radio in one hand and a tourniquet in the other. But for asterisk purpose. For the return of the thing that made me feel like myself. I stood up. I was wearing a navy blazer and dark trousers. No insignia, no rank, just Victoria Guard, civilian, former nothing according to the paperwork. But when I stood, something changed in the room. The people who remained felt it. My mother stopped crying and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between recognition and fear. "Your Honor," I said, "I'll need 20 minutes and access to the sealed exhibits from 2019. He nodded, just like that, because men like Judge Mercer don't ask questions they don't already know the answer to. What followed was not what anyone in that room expected. I am not a lawyer. I have never argued before a federal bench. But I had spent 11 years in military intelligence, 4 of them running operations in classified theaters, and the last 3 of them quietly consulting for a 3-letter agency that officially had no record of my name. I had read the language of classified documents the way some people read novels, for rhythm, for gaps, for what wasn't said. The document Dana's defense team had scrambled to hide was a derivative of a protocol I had personally designed in 2018. It bore modifications, subtle, sophisticated modifications, that told a story the prosecutor hadn't yet discovered. The contractor Dana had been working with hadn't just received intelligence. They had been feeding Asterisk back, inserting altered assessments into the official intelligence stream. Dana hadn't just been leaking. She had been the unwitting conduit for an influence operation targeting 3 separate Senate defense committees. My sister was not the architect. My sister was the door someone else had picked open. I spent 40 minutes laying this out before Judge Mercer, not shouting, not performing, just talking in the precise, measured cadence of someone who has briefed generals in the dark and made them understand the shape of a threat they couldn't see yet. By the time I finished, the prosecutor had requested an emergency recess. 2 federal agents had made phone calls. An attorney I didn't recognize had entered the courtroom from a door I hadn't noticed before. Dana sat at her table with tears running down her face, not because she was scared, I realized, but because she was finally understanding something. What had been done to her, what she had been made into, and perhaps, in some distant corner of that understanding, who her sister actually was. The charges against Dana were significantly restructured over the following weeks. She was not absolved. She had made choices, real choices, and those had consequences. But the full weight of what that courtroom had been preparing to deliver was redistributed onto the people who had actually designed the operation. 3 of them were indicted by the time spring arrived. One of them had a name I recognized from a briefing that officially never happened. I didn't go back to my family's Sunday dinners right away. Some distances take time to cross, and some silences leave marks even after they're broken. But my mother called me on a Wednesday evening in April. She didn't apologize. She's not a woman who apologizes easily, and I have made my peace with that. She said, very quietly, "I didn't know." "I know," I told her. "I should have." "Mom," I let the words settle, "I'm okay." And the thing is, I genuinely was. They never put my name in the paper. No press release, no ceremony, no correction to the record that lives in the public file. Victoria Guard still officially washed out. The paperwork still says administrative. There are people in this world who will go to their graves believing the story my family once told about me, and I have learned to carry that with the same steadiness I carry everything else. But here is what I know. I know what I did in the dark when no one was watching. I know the names of the people who are alive because I chose silence over credit. I know that real strength is not the kind that announces itself. It is the kind that shows up quietly in a courtroom on a Tuesday morning when a judge looks at a woman the world has written off and sees, somehow, exactly who she is. My name is Victoria Guard. I was never the failure. I was always the weapon they hadn't deployed yet. If this story moved you, share it. Someone in your life is sitting quietly in the back of a room right now, carrying something too heavy and too classified to explain. Remind them, silence is not defeat. Sometimes it is the highest form of service. Drop a red if